The mountain smoked beneath the moon. The dwarves they heard the tramp of doom. They fled their hall to dying fall, beneath his feet, beneath the moon. Hail friends, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will be talking about the dwarven stronghold of Erebor, the Lonely Mountain. This video was made in collaboration with Ambient Worlds, who has created a video consisting of the ambience and music of the Lonely Mountain. And speaking of music, Clamavi de Profundis has created a new dwarven-inspired song called When the Hammer Falls. I'll link both of these videos in the description, please check them out and give them a greeting from the men of the West. I'll also go ahead and link some related videos about the dwarves in the description and cards above. Finally, I'll link some articles that helped with the research of today's video in the description as well. Thank you all for joining me today, let's begin our tale. Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, was originally founded and controlled by the Longbeards, Dwarves folk, during the early Second Age, even before the arrival of the first Númenóreans in Middle-earth. This is when the dwarves of Khazad-dûm and the Middlemen had early friendships, and there was a flow of commerce between the Iron Hills and Khazad-dûm. But the Lonely Mountain truly becomes worthy of note after the fall of Moria to Durin's Bane in 1981 of the Third Age. The dwarves would flee to Erebor, and it is within the Lonely Mountain that the future kings of the Longbeards, hence also known as Kings Under the Mountain, would rule for a time. Thrain I, son of Nain I, was the first king of Erebor, and he would find the Arkenstone, which would be known as the Heart of the Mountain. The dwarves would officially establish the Kingdom Under the Mountain in 1999. The mountain was, indeed, solitary, and tall enough to have snow upon its peak, and its wealth was in metals and jewels, but it did not have mithril, as Khazad-dûm had. Nevertheless, many great treasures would come from Erebor, including the Arkenstone and other many fine items. From a bird's perspective, the mountain had a star shape with 6 different ridges coming from the peak. On the southwestern ridge was built Ravenhill, a guard post of the dwarves, where above laid the home of many intelligent ravens such as Kark and Rowak. In between the 2 central ridges on the south side of the mountain was the front gate of the dwarven city, and the river Running came forth from beneath the mountain and front gate, becoming a waterfall that ran into the valley, Long Lake, and beyond. On the west side of the Lonely Mountain was the secret back door and the subsequent road leading to it from the south, which was essential to Thorin's company during the quest of Erebor. Finally, inside the mountain itself were many chambers and delvings, as one would expect of a dwarven stronghold. Inside the front gate, one may go to the Great Chamber of Thror, where feasts and councils were held, or go further into the lower halls and the Great Hall of Thrain at the roots of the mountain, which likely held the throne of the king and served as the chamber of Smaug and his treasure hoard when the dragon claimed dominion over the mountain. Continuing the history of this great kingdom, Erebor would prosper for 211 years until 2210, when King Thorin I left Erebor with many, if not all of his folk and the Arkenstone, for arid Mithrin, the Grey Mountains, where were also others of Durin's folk, and the Longbeards would live there for a time, until the end of the War of the Dwarves and Dragons. Then, in 2590, many dwarves returned to Erebor under the leadership of King Thror, grandfather of Thorin Oakenshield, who yet bore the Arkenstone, and his uncle Borin, great-grandfather of Glóin. Others followed Thror's younger brother Gror, the grandfather of Dain Ironfoot, to the Iron Hills. Then Erebor was re-established as the capital of Durin's folk, and it prospered for almost 200 years, until the infamous coming of Smaug the Golden to the Lonely Mountain. In 2770, while Thorin II Oakenshield was out hunting, Smaug came and attacked Dale and the dwarves of Erebor. Thror, Thrain II, and other dwarves escaped out of the secret door, but many Longbeards fell that day. Any surviving dwarves would be made exiles, going to live in the Blue Mountains or elsewhere, and fighting in the War of the Dwarves and Orcs. From 2770 to 2941, Smaug would dwell within Erebor, bringing the dwarven treasure into the Great Hall of Thrain and sleeping upon it. But as we know, Durin's folk do not forgive their enemies easily, nor does the fire that burns within them for their homes of old die. With the help of Gandalf the Grey and Bilbo of the Shire, Thorin II Oakenshield and 12 of his kin would set out to reclaim the Lonely Mountain, using Thrain's map, key, and the secret door. Bilbo would play a part in awakening the dragon by retrieving the great golden cup of Thror from the treasure hoard of Erebor. Smaug would awaken enraged, going out to burn Lake Town, and in the process Bard the Bowman would fell the dragon. After this, Thorin would refuse to give the men of Lake Town and the elves of Mirkwood any treasure, and Thorin's company would be held in a siege. Bilbo would take the Arkenstone which he had found in Smaug's hoard as his 1/14th share, and he would give it to Bard to ransom for gold from Thorin. The men and elves almost came to battle the dwarves with the arrival of Dain II Ironfoot from the Iron Hills, But Gandalf would tell of the arrival of an army of orcs, wargs, and bats, which would make the Free Peoples set aside their differences and come together against their common enemy in the Battle of Five Armies. After the battle, treasures were properly distributed, Thorin and his nephews were laid to rest, and Dain would take up the mantle of king under the mountain. Thorin would be buried with the Arkenstone, and Orcrist would be laid atop his tomb, to glow in the dark at the approach of foes, so that Erebor may never be taken by surprise. There would be close friendship between the men, elves, and dwarves of the north thereafter, and members of Thorin's company would be made great lords in Erebor, but Dain would not give his approval to Balin for his expedition into Moria. However, in 3018 a messenger came to the Lonely Mountain from Mordor, asking about hobbits. He would promise the 3 last dwarven rings and Moria for the return of the One Ring, which the messenger downplayed as a small trinket, or lesser rewards and friendship with Sauron for news of the ring. If the dwarves refused, they would incur ill actions from the Dark Lord. The dwarves would not answer this, giving them time to think and act. Glóin would go to the Council of Elrond and warn Bilbo, and he would also seek counsel. And so war came from the east to the north, and the men of Dale would retreat to Erebor, and King Dain and King Brand, the grandson of King Bard, would stand together and fall together outside of the Lonely Mountain. The men and dwarves would fight the Easterlings until word reached the ears of Sauron's servants concerning the fall of the Dark Lord in the south. Fear came into the hearts of the Easterlings, and the men and dwarves pushed them back from Erebor, winning the Battle of Dale at a heavy cost. But Erebor and its allies would survive into the Fourth Age and prosper under the kingship of Thorin III Stonehelm and his son, Durin VII, who would reclaim Khazad-dûm for the Longbeards. Erebor would likely stay the capital of the Longbeards, but I wouldn't be surprised if the capital became Khazad-dûm once again. The dwarves of the Lonely Mountain would help mend the world in the years to come. For instance, Gimli and other Longbeards would build a new gate out of mithril and steel for Minas Tirith. Durin's folk would remain in their halls under the mountain until the end of the time of the dwarves. Thus brings us to the end of our tale about Erebor, the Lonely Mountain. From the history of the Lonely Mountain, we see the cost of pride and greed, and the reward of friendship and renewal. We must keep our friends close and be generous with them to withstand evil. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts on Erebor and its history? Personally, like really everything in Tolkien's works, I love Erebor, and it stands next to Khazad-dûm as one of my favorite dwarven strongholds. For more information, check out The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and its appendices, as well as the links to the Lonely Mountain articles in the description below. Let me know any thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections in the comments below. Also, please check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Patreon for our podcasts and Discord server in the description as well. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with a video on the Giants of Middle-earth. And don't forget to check out Ambient Worlds' Erebor video. As always, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.